Have you ever come across passages that you honestly thought it said it one way because that's what you were always taught or what you thought you were always taught? Then when you go and read it, you're like, oh, that's not what it says. Well, that's the experience that I had over the passage of the wise man and the foolish man. You see, in my memory, I thought I'd always been taught at Sunday school that it was saying the wise man was the person that heard the words of the Lord and did it. But the foolish man was the person who did what the world said to do and followed the world's advice. That's honestly what I thought I'd always been taught. Then I go back to this passage because it had just been mulling in the back of my mind for the last few months. So I open it up and read and go, oh, that's not what this passage says. So let's have a read. Let's see what this passage actually says and have a chat about it. So, this passage is the conclusion of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, which is found in the book of Matthew. So, this section is Matthew chapter 7, starting at verse 24. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them will be likened to a wise man who builds his house on the rock. The winds descend and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on the house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who builds his house on the sand, and the rains descend and the floods come up, and the winds blew and beat on the house, and it fell, and great was the fall. As I was reading through it, the key words that I picked up, Jesus says, those who hear these sayings of mine, those who hear my words and don't put them into practice, they're the ones that are likened to a foolish man. And over in the book of James, James turns around and says the same sort of thing. So let's turn there. So this is over in James chapter 1, starting at verse 22. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourself. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man observing his natural face in a mirror, for he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the word, this one will be blessed in what he does. So it is this principle of going, if you're going to hear what the word says, if we're going to listen and we're going to study and dive into what does the word say, it's not just to increase knowledge. This word, these Bible, these sayings of Jesus back in the Sermon of the Mount, it gives us this amazing instructions on how to have a good life. These are the principles that God has placed into the world, that if we do them, if we test and see, hey, if I try God's way, will the result that God said happen? That is what being a wise person is. It's going, okay, God, you turned around and said this, you turned around and said that this will be the outcome if I do it. So you know what? I'm going to try. I'm going to put it to the test and see if it's the case. Every person that I know that has dived into the Bible and done that, gone, okay, here's what God says. One of the examples, knock, seek, ask. If anybody is lacking what they need, ask God. But don't doubt in your heart. That's the other principle from James. Yes, I've just flipped between the Sermon on the Mount and this passage in James again. It is that whole thing of just trusting that God is going to come through for us because he says that he will supply all our needs. So it just comes down to Are we going to learn the principles of the Bible and put them into practice in our lives? Or when God gives us instructions, when God gives us warnings, are we going to go, no, God, I know better. I'm going to do it my way. And then we'll reap the consequence when what God said would happen happens.